Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every human life where the weight of failure, rejection or despair feels heavier than one can carry. In those moments, it is very tempting to say, this is it, I give up. But understand this, life never truly abandons you. It simply asks you, are you to grow? When a seed is buried under soil, it does not complain about the darkness, it does not say, I'm buried, I give up. No, it gathers itself, it pushes through the mud, it breaks through the earth and becomes a tree. That is life, life. That is how existence works. You are not meant to shrink in difficulty. You are meant to break through. Many people think pain is a punishment. It is not, it is a signal, a call to awaken something deeper within you. If everything came easy, you would never know the strength of your own spine. So, when life knocks you down, do not see it as cruelty. See it as life shaping you for something more profound. Never giving up is not about stubbornness, it is about clarity. It is about knowing that there is something within you worth unfolding, something that even the world has not seen yet. You do not fight life, you work with it, but you never walk away from it. Every time you rise again, even when your knees tremble, even when the heart is broken, you are making a declaration not to others, but to yourself. And understand this, no situation is permanent. No storm lasts forever. You keep walking, the road opens. But if you sit and weep, even the open road will look like a wall. Oh, never give up, not because success is guaranteed, but because your becoming is too precious to be abandoned. Bow down to the challenges, but do not surrender to them. Life is not about comfort, it is about transformation. Keep walking. Life will test you not because it wishes to break you, but because in the very nature of this existence, growth only happens through resistance. And if you look closely, even the tree stands firm because the wind is pushing. Even the river carves valleys not through ease but through constant pressure. So when life places you in the fire, it is not punishment, it is purification. Because only in the presence of friction does your hidden strength rise to the surface. And only in the moments when your knees are shaking, do you realize that you have legs strong enough to carry the weight of your becoming? You see, most people want a life of comfort, but nothing beautiful ever emerged from comfort. A diamond is born through pressure. A butterfly breaks its own cocoon in pain before it flies. And just like that, every hardship is a gate, and behind that gate is a version of you that you haven't met yet. A version you can only reach when everything else falls away and what is left is just raw, unshaped will, the kind that doesn't come from thought, but from the core of your being. And still when the tests come, the mind will say, this is too much. The heart will cry, it is unbearable. But the life within you, if you're willing to listen, will whisper quietly, this too is yours, whose life never gives anything to you unless it is necessary for your becoming. Not a single loss, not a single failure, not even that one unbearable heartbreak was random. It was all a sculptor's hand chiseling away what you are not. So what you truly are can finally… But in the moment it is happening, it doesn't feel sacred, it feels like suffering. And this is when most turn away, most curse the path, most say, why me? But the few who sit still in the fire, who bow down not in weakness but in surrender, they begin to see that even pain has intelligence, even sorrow has precision, and the test is not whether you suffer, the test is whether you awaken. And if you stay, if you don't run, if you look into the eyes of the storm and breathe, you'll notice something strange. Your resistance begins to dissolve. Not because the pain has gone, but because something larger than the pain has awakened within you, something that was never afraid, something that was never weak, something that remembers who you are beneath all the noise, something that does not break. So you walk on, not because the road has become easy, but because you are no longer measuring the road. You are simply walking, you are no longer asking life to be gentle, you are allowing life to do what it must. And in that allowing, there is a different kind of power, not the kind that screams or dominates, but the kind that stands calm while the whole world is shaking, the kind that smiles even as tears fall, the kind that has nothing left to prove. And eventually you realize the tests were never the enemy, they were the mirror, they were the tools, they were the thresholds, they were the burning grounds where the old self was set down and the new self emerged. And you bow not because you were defeated, but because you have seen the wisdom in the wound, the gift in the grief, the strength born only through surrender. So if life tests you again, and it will Remember, you are not being cursed, you are being carved, you are not being thrown away. You are being returned to yourself, and if you can simply stay, simply breathe, simply trust the unfolding, then every test becomes a teacher and every fall becomes a step, and every fall becomes a step. And every scar becomes a door through which something sacred enters. Failure is not some dark shadow that stands in the way of success. It is not a gate that denies you entry. It is not the enemy you must defeat, but rather it is the soil in which your roots must grow. It is the silence before the song. It is the sharpening of your inner blade. And until you fail, truly fail, not in the eyes of others, but in the space within yourself where expectation collapses, you will not know the taste of what it means to rise from your own ashes. Because success is not a destination, it is an unfolding. And in that unfolding, every step backward is still a step forward if you are willing to learn. You see, we live in a world where everyone is trying to skip the fall and reach the mountaintop without the climb, where we are taught to hide our wounds, to be ashamed of our attempts that did not bloom. But no tree grows straight into the sky without first bending, without breaking through layers of resistance, and in the same way, you will not reach your highest without stumbling through your lowest, because failure is not the opposite of life. It is part of life. And every time you try something and fall short, it is not a sign to stop, but a call to deepen, a call to refine, to realign, to release the idea. Things must go perfectly, because perfection is a trap and failure is a mirror. And when you look into that mirror, you look into that mirror. You don't see what's wrong with you see what needs attention, you see where the cracks are. So you can fill them not with shame, but with awareness, not with guilt, but with grit. And that is how you… Even the most radiant flower was once a broken seed in darkness. Even the most graceful dancer once stumbled over their own feet. Even the wisest teacher once spoke with uncertainty. And if you can stop holding failure like a wound and begin to hold it like a tool, you will see that it is not trying to destroy your path. It is your path shaped by every fall, every correction, every attempt when others only stayed safe. The truth is, no one ever reached mastery without messing up. No one ever touched greatness without first losing their balance again and again and again and again, and still choosing to stand back up. Not because success was guaranteed, but because something in them refused to let failure be the end, because they knew that falling is not the death of progress, but the very heartbeat of it. And when you begin to walk this way, with your head held high even after defeat, when you begin to meet your failures, like old friends who have returned to teach you again, then you start moving, not just toward success, but toward depth, toward presence, toward maturity. Because failure has a way of stripping the ego, burning the illusions, and showing you what actually matters. So don't run from failure, don't try to bury it under fake smiles or rushed victories. Don't pretend it didn't happen, rather sit with it, feel it, hold it, learn its language. Because once you understand what your failure is trying to say, it will stop hurting and start guiding. It will stop being a weight and start becoming a compass. And slowly, you will stop fearing it altogether. And in that space beyond fear, beyond perfectionism, beyond needing to prove yourself, you will finally find freedom. The kind of freedom that only comes when you are no longer afraid to begin again. When you see failure, not as the end of your story, but as the end of your story, but as the wisdom between the lines. And when you truly realize that failure was never the opposite of success, but always, always its very beginning, there is a force within you that doesn't tremble when the world shakes, that does not waver when the winds of change blow wild and ruthless, a force that is not loud but unyielding, not aggressive but immovable. And that force is your inner resolve. The silent fire that burns steady beneath the chaos. The one thing that no external circumstance can touch unless you yourself give it away. Because while the world outside may be full of uncertainty, unpredictability, even cruelty at times, what happens within you is the only space where true mastery is possible. You may not control how people treat you, what they say, what they do, how they live, or how they praise. You may not control whether the road ahead is smooth or filled with thorns, but you can decide whether your steps are hesitant or full of purpose. You can choose whether to be broken by the storm or to bend like a tree that knows how to dance with the wind. And this choice is not made once, but again and again, especially when the noise is loud and the path unclear, especially when the temptation to collapse seems justified. And it is here, in the quiet corners of difficulty, that your inner resolve becomes the most valuable thing you possess, not your talents, not your reputation, not even your circumstances, but your ability to stay centered when everything tries to pull you up. Your ability to remain steady when all else demands reaction. Because outer forces can only dominate when the inner ground is abandoned. And if you do not hand over your peace, no one can take it from you. You may lose things in life, money, opportunities, people, positions, but do not lose your capacity to stand within yourself because that is the source of your strength. And that source is not found in books or borrowed from others or bought through effort, it is accessed through presence, through stillness, through the deep knowing that no matter what rises or falls around you do not have to rise or fall with it unless you decide to. And sometimes, life will challenge this knowing, not gently but violently. It will press, push, provoke, and even in those moments, you will be asked not to win the fight outside but to hold the line inside, to not let anger become your compass, to not let fear take the reins, to not let bitterness disguise itself as power, because power that is reactive is not strength. It is noise, but power that arises from stillness, from clarity, from alignment is unshakable even when the entire world loses balance. So build that inner ground not with stubbornness but with conscious presence, not by resisting the world, but by becoming so rooted within that the world cannot pull you out, not by denying pain, but by letting pain deepen your roots. Because every time you return to yourself in the middle of outer confusion, you are proving to life that you can be trusted with more. Not because you are loud, but because you are grounded. Now, once you begin to experience this, truly experience it, not as an idea, but as a living truth, you will stop chasing control and start embodying freedom. You will stop needing the outer to validate the inner. And you will start realizing that peace is not something to be found, but something to be practiced, even in the fire, especially in the fire, because what you practice in chaos becomes your nature in calm. And in that you will see that inner resolve is not a tool to be used against life. It is the very foundation upon which life itself can be lived with dignity, with direction, with grace. So hold that space, protect that stillness, return to that center again and again. Because in a world that constantly pulls outward, the one who can remain inward is the one who truly moves forward. There is a moment in every journey when the weight becomes too much, when the silence becomes too loud, when the results don't match the effort and the heart whispers, just give up. And in that moment, it feels so tempting, so reasonable, to walk away quietly, quietly, to disappear from the dream you once believed in. But what we often fail to see in that moment is that quitting does not bring peace. It brings a hollow space, a space where the question what if begins to echo louder than any noise the world can make, and that echo stays not for a day, yeah, not for a week, but often for a lifetime. Because when you quit, you don't only leave the struggle, you leave a piece of yourself behind, a piece that knew how to hope, how to try, how to fall and still want to rise. And no matter how justified the quitting may feel in that hour of darkness, it plants a seed of regret, a small one at first. But it grows and one day you find yourself staring back at a younger version of you who had fire in the eyes and wonder in the soul, and you will realize you didn't just quit the goal, you quit on the version of you who believed it was possible. And yet there is another road quieter but more powerful, not the road of forcing, but the road of persistence, not persistence as struggle or blind endurance, but persistence as secret commitment, as remembering why you began even when the path forgets you, as choosing to show up one more time, even when no one is watching, because persistence is not about speed, it is about presence, and presence is what makes transformation possible. Every time you persist, you grow in ways you cannot see in the moment. You may not get the outcome you expected, but you become someone who cannot be shaken easily, someone who knows what it means to keep the flame alive in the wind. And that kind of becoming is more valuable than any short-term success, because transformation is not what happens to you, it is what you allow to happen through you over time, slowly, deeply, silently. And persistence teaches you patience, not the kind that waits helplessly, but the kind that moves forward even when time doesn't respond, the kind that doesn't need applause or instant results, because it knows the value of each small step, each failed attempt, each quiet repetition. And somewhere along that path, without even realizing it, you cross an invisible threshold. Not into perfection but into depth, not into fame but into integrity. And once you taste the power of persistence, quitting no longer feels like an option. Not because you're stubborn, but because you have seen the difference between temporary struggle and permanent regret. You have felt the sting of almost giving up, and now you choose differently. Not because it's easy, but because now you know that nothing worth becoming comes without a cost. So do not fear the slow road, do not measure your progress only by milestones. Measure it by who you are becoming in the dark, measure it by how many times you showed up when no one clapped, how many times you chose to trust without evidence, and because that is where the real transformation happens. Not in grand moments, but in the quiet decisions to not walk away. And one day when you look back, not from the top, but from a place of stillness, you will not remember all the rewards or the recognition. You will remember the days you almost quit but didn't, the days you cried but continued, and in those memories there will be no regret, only a quiet knowing that you walked through fire and did not burn. You transformed. The journey of your life is not measured by how far you've come, or how much you've gained, or even how many people have seen your steps, by the quiet courage it takes to continue walking, especially when no one understands, especially when the road turns barren and silent. Because the meaning of your path does not live in grand moments or perfect destinations. It lives in the act of continuing, of waking up once more, of placing one foot in front of the other, even when the heart is tired and the mind uncertain. You may pause, you may stumble, you may take detours or sit down to catch your breath, but as long as the movement within you has not died, as long as something in you still whispers, go on, then your journey still carries meaning, not because it looks impressive to others, but because it is alive. And what is alive is always becoming something more, always unfolding some layer of truth, some thread of purpose that can only be discovered in motion. The moment you stop walking, not physically but inwardly, the moment you decide it's no longer worth trying, hoping, reaching, then something in you begins to close, something begins to shrink. Because life cannot fill what has already chosen to empty itself, not from loss but from resignation. And resignation is different from rest, because rest is sacred, but quitting is surrendering the soul's invitation to grow. And sometimes the next step is not a giant leap, sometimes it's the smallest movement, a breath taken with intention, a single word spoken with honesty, a decision to forgive, a decision to begin again. And it is in these tiny movements that the journey renews itself. It is here that meaning returns, not through noise or recognition, but through presence, through simply choosing not to give up on yourself. Because every ending that feels like a failure may only be a turn in the road, a chapter closing so a deeper one can begin. But if you stop too soon, you never meet that next version of yourself. You never reach the clearing just beyond the forest. You never hear the song that only plays after the silence. And that is why continuation is sacred. Not because it guarantees ease, but because it opens the space for what's next to arrive. Even when you do not know where you are going, even when the map is unclear, even when every step feels blind, as long as you are still walking, there is still possibility. And in that possibility, there is meaning. Because meaning is not something handed to you. It is something you create by choosing not to freeze when fear comes, by choosing not to fold when things don't make sense, by choosing movement over stagnation again and again. And if you look closely, you will see that the most beautiful moments in life often came just after the point when you thought it was over, just after the moment you almost gave up, just after the darkness had done its worst, and something still chose to rise in you, quietly, fiercely, tenderly. And that rising was not because everything became clear, it was because you continued, and in continuing, you became more than you were before. So remember this, not for others, not even for the world, but for your own becoming. Your journey only has meaning when it continues, not because it must be fast, not because it must be perfect, but because every step you take after doubt, after defeat, after despair, is a step where life begins again.